The police lights painted the quiet HOA street red and blue as neighbors stepped outside, whispering. No one expected this call to end the way it would. The video promised a truth so shocking that even the officer would freeze when it surfaced. Mark had just returned home from a long business trip, suitcase still in his hand, when the HOA president marched toward him with a smug smile. She waved a paper claiming a $3,900 fine for unauthorized exterior changes. Mark barely had time to speak before police cruisers arrived. The HOA president folded her arms, confident she had won. She told the officer Mark had refused to pay and was being aggressive. Mark stayed calm, knowing something far deeper was about to unfold. His wife, Lena, stood silently beside him, her eyes steady, unreadable. The officer listened, nodding slowly, as neighbors gathered closer. The HOA president's voice grew louder, more dramatic, certain the law was on her side. But what she didn't know was that this moment was walking straight toward a truth she could never undo. And as the officer asked for documents, Lena gently reached into her bag, setting the stage for a revelation that would change everything. The HOA president proudly handed over violation notices, pointing at dates and bold red numbers. She spoke like a judge delivering a sentence, enjoying every word. The officer studied the papers, then turned to Mark, asking if he understood the fine. Mark nodded calmly and said he did, but that the fine itself was unlawful. That single sentence made the air feel heavier. The HOA president laughed, telling the officer that homeowners always say that when caught. She insisted the rules apply to everyone equally. Lena remained quiet, watching the officer's expression change as Mark explained that the fine was issued without notice, hearing, or proof. The officer asked if Mark had appealed through HOA channels. Mark replied that appeals were denied without explanation. Neighbors began murmuring, sensing tension shifting. The HOA president interrupted repeatedly, demanding immediate payment or further action. That impatience revealed more than she realized. The officer raised a hand, signaling her to stop. He turned back to Lena, who had not spoken once. He asked if she had anything to add. Slowly, she nodded and said yes. What she was about to reveal wasn't anger, wasn't shouting, but something far more powerful. And the HOA president's confident smile began to fade. Lena stepped forward with calm precision, her voice steady but firm. She said the fine violated state property law and due process requirements. The HOA president scoffed, calling it nonsense. The officer, however, leaned in slightly, listening more closely now. Lena explained that fines above a certain amount required legal review. She asked the officer if he was aware of that threshold. The officer paused. He admitted he was. That single pause shifted the entire scene. The HOA president's tone sharpened, accusing Lena of trying to intimidate law enforcement. Lena didn't react. Instead, she opened her bag and removed a small leather folder. She didn't wave it dramatically. She simply opened it and held it where the officer could see. The officer's eyes dropped to the seal on the document. His posture changed instantly. He stopped writing. The neighbors noticed. Silence spread across the street. The HOA president leaned forward, confused, asking what that was supposed to mean. Lena calmly stated her profession and said the seal was current and valid. The officer asked if he could examine it more closely. Lena nodded. And in that moment, power shifted without a single raised voice. The officer examined the seal carefully, then looked back at Lena with a new level of respect. His voice softened as he asked a confirming question. Lena answered quietly, confirming she was a sitting judge in the county circuit court. The street felt frozen. The HOA president's face drained of color as realization hit her all at once. The officer cleared his throat and explained that issuing fines without due process could expose the HOA to legal consequences. He stated clearly that the fine was not enforceable in its current form. The HOA president tried to recover, insisting she was just following rules. But the confidence was gone. Lena explained that she had avoided using her position until now, hoping the HOA would act fairly. She said the police were called under false pretenses. The officer nodded, acknowledging the misuse of emergency services. Neighbors exchanged stunned looks. The HOA president attempted to argue again, but the officer stopped her firmly. He informed her that the matter would be documented and referred for review. What started as an attempt to intimidate had turned into exposure. And the person who called the police was now the one under scrutiny. The officer explained that HOAs are not above the law and must follow proper legal procedures. He told the HOA president that threatening homeowners with unlawful fines could lead to civil penalties. Her voice shook as she tried to defend herself, claiming she was protecting the community. Lena responded with quiet clarity, saying leadership requires responsibility, not fear. She explained how intimidation erodes trust and damages neighborhoods. The officer asked Mark if he wished to file a report regarding harassment. Mark said yes, calmly but decisively. That answer echoed louder than shouting ever could. Neighbors nodded in agreement. Some recorded silently, others whispered about past fines they never questioned. The HOA president looked around and realized the crowd was no longer on her side. The officer informed her she was free to leave but warned her that further action would follow. She walked away stiffly, her authority shattered in front of everyone she once controlled. Mark and Lena stood together, not victorious in pride, but firm in principle. Yet the final twist had not fully landed. That would come after the official paperwork was filed. Days later, the HOA board received formal notices requesting financial records and enforcement procedures. The president resigned within 48 hours. An independent audit revealed multiple unlawful fines issued over several years. Homeowners were refunded thousands collectively. Mark and Lena received written apologies from neighbors who had once avoided them. The community began rebuilding trust through open meetings and transparent rules. The officer followed up, confirming the misuse of police services had been recorded. Lena never publicized her role. She quietly ensured the process stayed fair for everyone. Her goal was never revenge, only correction. The neighborhood slowly transformed from fear-driven silence into honest conversation. Mark reflected on how close they came to being publicly shamed. One call, one lie, could have changed everything. But truth had a way of surfacing when patience met integrity. The story spread quietly, not as gossip, but as a lesson. Power without accountability always collapses. And those who try to intimidate often forget one thing. You never know who truly understands the law until it's too late. Months later, the street felt different. Kinder. Neighbors waved again. Children played freely. Rules still existed, but fear did not. Mark and Lena never sought attention for what happened. They simply lived peacefully, knowing standing calm had changed everything. The former HOA president faded from community memory, remembered only as a warning. The audit results were posted publicly, ensuring transparency going forward. The board adopted clearer procedures and legal oversight. Mark often thought about that night. How silence, not shouting, held the most power. How the truth didn't need drama to win. It only needed the right moment. Lena reminded him that justice works best when it's quiet and fair. Their home felt safer not because rules changed, but because respect returned, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.